My wife looked me right in the eyes and said, "You're sleeping in the garage tonight. My boyfriend's coming over." For half a second, I forgot how to breathe. The woman I built a home for just erased me, with one sentence. I should have shouted, thrown something, begged her to explain. But I didn't. I just stared at her, the way a soldier stares at the first crack in a wall before it collapses. She laughed, thinking she'd broken me. What she didn't see was the storm she'd just woken. Every sacrifice, every quiet apology, every piece of myself I'd buried to keep her happy, came back, sharp as glass. When I finally spoke, my voice was calm. "All right," I said, "if that's what you want." I walked out of the kitchen, heart still beating steady, because sometimes when a man stops fighting to be loved, he remembers how dangerous he used to be. Stay with me. This is the part she never saw coming. Before this story makes sense, there's something you need to know about me. For 15 years, I worked for a branch of the government that officially doesn't exist. No logo, no address, no record. I was the man they called when things had to disappear. Sometimes people, sometimes truths. My name changed so many times that Daniel became just another alias. In that life, trust was a weakness. Silence was survival. I learned to become whoever the mission required, a traitor, a tourist, a ghost. And when the job was done, I walked away without leaving a shadow. You don't do that for 15 years and come out clean. You come out hollow. You learn to sleep with your back to the wall. You learn to keep secrets even from yourself. When I left the agency, they wiped me from every database. No past, no record, just a man with steady hands and too many ghosts. That's who she married later, though she never knew it. And the night she told me to sleep in the garage, she woke a part of me that agency never managed to erase. My work was the kind you don't talk about over dinner. Terror cells, hostage rescues, quiet disappearances. I saw men betray their countries, their friends, themselves. I saw how loyalty breaks when the pressure's right, and I learned how to make that pressure. Some nights, faces still come back, people I saved, people I couldn't. Sometimes I can't tell the difference anymore. You tell yourself you're serving a greater cause, but the line between justice and revenge gets thin out there. I remember one mission, 13 hours in a desert safe house waiting for a signal that never came. By the time we moved, 3 good men were dead. I never forgot their silence. After years of darkness, I craved something simple. A morning coffee that didn't taste like dust, a conversation that didn't hide a motive, a home that didn't need alarms on every door. So I walked away, turned in the badge that never existed, and promised myself one thing. If I ever built a life again, it would be honest, quiet, normal. At least that's what I told myself. I became Daniel Carter, an IT consultant who worked from home, a man who paid taxes, watered his lawn, and waved to neighbors he barely knew. For the first time in decades, I could breathe without checking the mirrors. No aliases, no briefings at 2 a.m., just quiet. But quiet can be dangerous for a man like me. It makes you remember. It gives the ghosts room to talk. I set up my office in the spare bedroom. 3 monitors, a cheap desk, a view of the street. Nothing suspicious. That was the point. I told people I handled small business networks. They believed me. Why wouldn't they? I looked harmless. Some nights I still woke up reaching for a gun that wasn't there. Old habits don't die. They just wait. But every morning I told myself the same thing. You're Daniel now. Normal, ordinary, safe. It was almost convincing, until the day I met her. I met Jennifer at a charity fundraiser downtown. She moved through the crowd like she owned the air around her, confident, organized, beautiful in a way that made you straighten your posture. She was running the event, telling people where to stand, what to do, and somehow doing it without sounding bossy. When she smiled at me, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Normal. We talked about work. She planned events. I worked in tech. She liked stability. I pretended to be exactly that. Her laugh was clean, practiced, but it felt real enough. I told myself she was everything I needed. Steady, predictable, safe. After years of chaos, the idea of someone like her felt like a rescue, a quiet harbor after too many storms. We had dinner 2 days later. She talked about goals, mortgages, 5-year plans. I nodded and listened, hiding the part of me that still heard the click of safeties and coded radios. 8 months later, we were married. A simple ceremony. White dress, small smiles, polite applause. For the first time, I believed I was done with that other life, but I should have known better. Men like me don't retire. We just pretend to. We got married in spring. Small church, a few friends, no secrets. At least that's what I told myself. After the ceremony, we bought a 2-story house at the edge of town. Quiet street. Neighbors who waved and mowed their lawns on Saturdays. I thought this was what peace looked like. Every morning I made coffee while Jennifer planned her day. She filled the house with flowers, scents of candles, soft music. It felt like a life borrowed from someone else, someone better adjusted. I worked from home, fixing small IT problems for clients. She managed events and came home tired but pleased with herself. We laughed sometimes, cooked together, talked about vacations we never took. At night, I lay beside her and tried to believe the silence meant safety. But even then, part of me kept listening, for the sound of something breaking. For a while, everything looked perfect. Friends called us steady. Family said we made sense, and I wanted to believe them. But perfection has an expiration date. You just never know when it's printed. I became the kind of husband people praise at dinner parties. Quiet, agreeable, predictable. I said yes, dear, more times than I can count. I let her choose the furniture, the paint, even what I wore. If she wanted control, I gave it to her. She said she loved how calm I was, how nothing seemed to bother me. What she didn't realize, it takes years of training to bury reactions that deep. I smiled when she corrected me in front of friends. I nodded when she called me boring. I told myself peace was worth more than pride, but peace built on silence rots. Inside, I could feel pieces of myself fading. The man who once made decisions in seconds now waited for permission to speak. One night she laughed and said, "You'd make a great lab partner, never an argument." I laughed with her, but later, lying awake, I realized I couldn't remember the last time I felt like a man. The first cracks were small, a sigh when I spoke, an eye roll when I tried to help. She started staying late at work events, forgot to mention dinners until the last minute, left me notes instead of conversations. Her phone buzzed more often, always face down. Her smile changed, sharper, distant. When I asked if something was wrong, she said I was paranoid. I told myself all couples drift, that maybe I was still learning how to be normal, that maybe love just looks different after a while. But every small cruelty left a mark, a cut you can't show anyone. I kept swallowing it, pretending not to taste the bitterness. One evening she told a friend, "Daniel's harmless. That's what I like about him." I smiled from the kitchen doorway and something inside me went cold. Harmless. The word echoed like a bullet that missed its mark. Nathan called one night. We hadn't seen each other since the wedding. He looked at me through the video screen and said, "She doesn't respect you, brother." I laughed it off, said he was imagining things. He shook his head. "I know that tone, Daniel. I've heard it before. You're not her partner. You're her project." His words stung more than I wanted to admit. Nathan had seen me under fire, bleeding, half dead, still fighting. Now he saw me defeated by eye rolls and silence. I told him he didn't understand, that maybe this was what normal life felt like. Compromise, patience, calm. He sighed. There's a difference between calm and surrender. After the call ended, I sat in the dark for a long time. The screen's reflection showed a man I barely recognized. I wanted to prove Nathan wrong, but deep down, I already knew he was right. I kept telling myself things were fine, that every marriage hits rough patches, that Jennifer was just stressed, not cruel. Each morning I put on the same calm smile. Each night I told myself I'd earned this peace. But it wasn't peace, it was paralysis. I walked on eggshells so quietly, I forgot how it felt to stand tall. When friends asked how we were, I said, "Good, automatic, empty." Sometimes she would touch my hand at dinner and for a moment I believed her again. But when she pulled away, the cold stayed longer than the warmth. I started avoiding mirrors. Didn't like the man staring back. He looked harmless too. People think the worst lies are the ones we tell others. They're wrong. The worst lie is the one that keeps you comfortable. And I was very comfortable in my cage. Then the patterns changed. She started going to the gym 5 days a week. New perfume, new clothes. Her phone now had a password. She said it was for work emails. I didn't ask. Didn't need to. You don't spend years hunting liars without learning how they breathe. Late nights became normal. The smell of cologne that wasn't mine clung to her coat. She smiled too easily when she texted. I kept my voice even, my movements calm. Old instincts woke quietly inside me. Observation, patience, timing. She thought she was clever, but I'd seen this before. In enemies, in assets, in traitors. The difference was this one wore my ring. I could have confronted her. I could have broken the illusion in a heartbeat. Instead, I waited. Because once you know the truth is coming, you don't chase it. You prepare for it. And I was done pretending not to see. I didn't confront her. Didn't shout. Didn't even change my tone. I just started watching. Old instincts slid back into place like a well-oiled weapon. I tracked routines, departure times, calls that came too late, texts that ended too fast. Every night, I took notes in a small black book. Dates, locations, patterns, no emotion, no judgment, just data. Anger clouds precision, and I needed precision. It felt almost peaceful, this quiet discipline I hadn't used in years. The same calm I once carried in enemy territory now filled my kitchen. She had no idea. She thought she'd beaten me. But the moment I started collecting evidence, the balance shifted. I wasn't her husband anymore. I was her observer. And in my world, observers always win. It happened by accident. She thought I was upstairs. I'd gone to the garage to grab a charger when I heard her voice through the door, soft, excited, cruel. "I can't wait, baby," she said. "He's pathetic. He won't even see it coming. My lawyer says I'll get the house and support payments. We'll be set." We didn't have children. Child support, fabricated leverage. I froze. For a second, I felt nothing. Then everything. That voice didn't belong to the woman I married. It belonged to a stranger who'd decided my life was a prize to be divided. She laughed again, lighter this time. "I love you, Brandon." I walked away without a sound. Upstairs, I sat in the dark and listened to the quiet hum of the fridge. In that hum, I heard my pulse, slow, controlled. That's when I knew. The man she thought she could manipulate was gone. Brandon Pierce, 42. Real estate developer, unmarried. I ran a check that night using systems I was never supposed to touch again, databases that didn't officially exist. His record was a graveyard of other people's mistakes. 3 quiet paternity settlements, 2 partners defrauded, dozens of women he'd charmed, drained, and discarded. A predator. Not the kind you find in alleys. The kind that smiles across dinner tables. I read every name, every ruin he'd left behind. And in the reflection of my monitor, I saw the same calm expression I used to wear before a mission. Jennifer wasn't his first. She was just the latest. And maybe, if I'd walked away right then, I could have stayed human. But some things you don't walk away from. Some people only understand consequences. And I was done letting hunters roam free. That night, something inside me woke up. The part I'd buried under years of normalcy. I didn't pack a bag, didn't leave a note. I simply stopped pretending. I could have filed for divorce, moved on, let them destroy each other. But that's not how I'm wired. When you've hunted men across continents, you learn one truth. Justice doesn't happen by itself. Someone has to pull the trigger. So I decided to wait, to let them think they were winning, to let them believe I was harmless, predictable, beaten. And when the moment was right, I'd remind them who they were dealing with. Not Daniel Carter, the IT consultant. Not the quiet husband who smiled through humiliation. No. They were about to meet the man I used to be. Thursday night, I made salmon with roasted vegetables. Followed the recipe exactly. She picked at the plate, scrolling on her phone. "This is too dry," she said. Then, with a smirk, "You're not good at cooking. You're not good at a lot of things." She stood, chair scraping the floor. "I'm going out. Don't wait up." Perfume. Heavier than usual. Probably his. The door closed. Silence returned. I sat there, looking at her untouched plate. The smell of roasted garlic and burnt trust hung in the air. That's when it hit me. This house, this life, this version of me, it all belonged to her lies. But the quiet man at that table wasn't broken. He was sharpening. When she walked out that night, I wasn't mourning a marriage, I was preparing for war. I spent the next week building files, names, photos, timelines. Brandon Pierce wasn't alone. He had connections, shell companies, fake real estate projects, offshore accounts. Every lead I followed opened another door. Every door led to someone he'd hurt. I contacted a few of them anonymously, listened to their stories, same pattern, different faces. He promised them love. He left them broke. Jennifer fit perfectly into his game, but he'd made one mistake. He picked a woman married to someone who knew how to hunt. At night, I mapped everything on my laptop, every transaction, every alias, slow, methodical, precise. By the time I finished, I wasn't looking at a marriage anymore. I was looking at a mission. And for the first time in years, I felt alive. She came back close to 2 a.m., drunk. Perfume that wasn't hers clinging to the air. I didn't ask where she'd been, didn't look at her, just noted the facts. Wine stains on her wrist, lipstick smudged at the corner of her mouth, keys dropped twice before finding the lock. She didn't speak, neither did I. When she stumbled past me, I caught the faint trace of men's cologne, sharp, foreign, deliberate. I added it to the list in my notebook. No accusations, no emotion, only record keeping. People mistake silence for weakness. It isn't. It's storage. She crawled into bed without removing her makeup. I sat in the kitchen until dawn, writing everything down. The house smelled like strangers. So did my life. She came home early the next evening, her face bright, her voice lighter than it had been in months. She showered for an hour, used perfume I'd never bought. Then she slipped into the red dress I once gave her, the one she'd hated. I stayed in the living room, silent, watched her reflection pass through mirrors like fire behind glass. Every movement was careful, rehearsed, lipstick deeper, nails brighter. She was preparing for someone, not me. That dress became a flag, bright, cruel, final. I remembered giving it to her on our anniversary. She said red was too loud. Tonight she wanted to be heard. I didn't stop her, didn't ask who she was meeting. I only wrote down the time. Anger has its uses, so does control. She walked into the room, arms crossed, red dress shining under the lamp. "You're sleeping in the garage tonight," she said. "My boyfriend's coming over." For a second, I almost laughed. The calm in her voice was surgical, precise. She expected me to beg, maybe to shout, maybe to make her feel powerful. Instead, I said, "All right, if that's what you want." Her eyes flickered, just for a moment, like she'd seen something she couldn't name. She thought she'd humiliated me. She'd done something else entirely. That sentence cut everything loose. Fear, loyalty, love. I picked up my keys, and the silence between us became an ocean she'd never cross again. I walked to the car with one small bag. No hurry, no drama. The night was cold and clean. Streetlights blurred through the windshield as I drove. Every mile between us felt like a breath I'd been holding for years. I didn't feel free. Not yet. Freedom has weight before it becomes light. At a red light, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror, calm, unfamiliar. I realized I wasn't escaping a woman. I was escaping the version of myself that needed her approval. The house disappeared behind me. So did the man she'd built. 20 minutes later, I pulled into a roadside hotel, paid cash, asked for a room facing the parking lot. Inside, beige walls, stiff sheets, humming air conditioner. Perfect anonymity. I set the laptop on the desk and powered it up. 5 hidden camera feeds appeared on the screen. Living room, kitchen, garage, hallway, bedroom. Installed 3 months earlier when instinct first told me something was wrong. The house appeared quiet. Too quiet. I adjusted the angle, took a slow breath, and waited. The same calm I'd carried through covert missions returned like muscle memory. This wasn't jealousy. It was evidence. And evidence never lies. At 8:47 p.m., headlights swept across my driveway. Silver Porsche 911, Brandon Pierce. Jennifer met him at the door, smiling like a woman in a commercial. They kissed. She laughed. He carried her inside. I watched until they disappeared into the hallway. Then I closed the laptop. Not out of mercy, out of self-preservation. There are things you only need to know once. After that, the details become poison. The screen went dark. In the reflection, I saw a calm face staring back, steady, emotionless, patient. People think heartbreak breaks you. It doesn't. It empties you. And once you're empty, you have room for something new. I wasn't broken. I was clearing space for what came next. I spent the next 2 nights tracing Brandon's trail, every file, every woman, every lie. It wasn't random, it was a system. He targeted women with assets, houses, savings, reputations worth stealing. He fed them attention until they mistook manipulation for love. Then he rewired their lives around him. Fake investments, joint accounts, loans in their names. By the time they realized what happened, he was gone, and they were bankrupt. The anger that should have burned me alive did something else. It focused me. Each document I opened felt like another step toward justice. Not revenge, not yet. But I understood something then. My marriage wasn't a tragedy. It was evidence. Patterns always lead somewhere. Brandon wasn't smart enough to build that web alone. I found his partner buried in corporate filings. Kevin Chen, 41, former government analyst turned ghost accountant. He ran the back end, shell companies, wire transfers, offshore accounts, a man who knew how to vanish money and himself. Together, they'd built a small empire of quiet theft. They called it consulting. I sat in the dim hotel light watching their names circle each other through data streams. My hands didn't shake, my pulse didn't rise, because now the hunt had 2 targets, and both were already inside my sights. Before Brandon could dig into my past, I planted what he was meant to find. A false dossier, military records, blacked-out reports, hints of operations no one could verify. Enough truth to feel real. Enough darkness to terrify anyone curious. I scattered it across old government mirrors. Places Kevin Chen would think he'd hacked. By morning, the internet whispered my name like a threat. Carter, the operative who made people disappear. They wouldn't know what was true. That's the beauty of fear. It doesn't need facts. For the first time in months, I felt control settle back into my hands. Not rage, just order. The board was set. Now I waited for them to move. It didn't take long. At midnight, my phone lit up. Messages from Jennifer. "Where are you?" "Something's wrong. Brandon saw something on your computer. He freaked out. He left." 47 texts, each one a different flavor of fear. I read them all, then typed one line, "I'm fine, don't call tonight," and sent it. Silence followed. Beautiful, heavy silence. For the first time since this began, I wasn't reacting to her. She was reacting to me. Power had changed hands. At 5 a.m., I called Nathan. He answered on the second ring. "You ready?" he asked. "I am." No need for explanations. He understood. By sunrise, we had a plan. Gather intel, trace money, prepare statements. No guns, no violence, just evidence, sharpened like a blade. Nathan handled the tech. I handled the field. We weren't agents anymore, but for the first time in years, we had purpose. It felt like breathing again. We dug deeper. Every thread led to new horizons. A so-called women's empowerment group Brandon used as a hunting ground. Behind it stood Rita Walsh, disbarred lawyer, Brandon's former girlfriend and fixer. She coached women through fake divorces, planted false evidence, and funneled payouts through offshore shells Kevin Chen managed. A perfect triangle of greed. We mapped everything: dates, names, money. Each line connected like a disease spreading under glass. By the time we were done, their empire looked fragile. All it needed was one push, and I was done waiting. She came to the hotel mid-morning, hair a mess, mascara streaked, pretending to be the scared wife. Her voice shook in the lobby. She asked if I was all right. She knocked on my door and stepped inside like a woman rehearsing a role. I shut the door behind her. I did not hug her. I did not offer tea. I laid a thick envelope on the bed. Photos, text logs, screenshots, timestamps, bank transfers. Then I slid a second envelope across the covers, signed divorce papers. She read. Her hands trembled. Her face drained color in stages. For a moment she looked like a child who'd been caught taking cookies. Then anger flared. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. I said nothing at first. I let the evidence answer. I watched her try to build an excuse out of nothing. She failed. There was no script left that could save her. When she asked if I still loved her, I felt nothing but an even calm. "This is about truth," I said. "You wanted to make a life that worked for you. Fine. Now make it without my name on the door." She left the room shaking. I closed the door softly. Relief came like cold water. Filing felt clinical. Not petty, not vengeful. Strategic, necessary. I listed adultery and conspiracy. I attached evidence, emails, bank records, witness statements, the patterns we'd mapped. Every line was a thread I'd pulled until the whole fabric unraveled. I asked for the house, the car, the accounts, not out of spite, out of fairness. She had spent our shared life as if it were her portfolio. She had treated our home like a bargaining chip. At the clerk's office, I signed my name with steady hands. The paper made the choices real. It formalized what my eyes had already seen for months. When they served the papers, she didn't scream, she didn't beg. She signed her receipt like someone signing for bad news. The law doesn't heal, but it can make consequences visible. That mattered. Restoring my name mattered. Owning the thing I'd built mattered. I walked out of the courthouse lighter in ways I couldn't explain. Not because I'd won a fight, but because I stopped pretending the fight didn't exist. She accused me of cruelty when we met next. "You're cruel," she said, voice small but sharp. "You're making me homeless." I looked at her, calm, unmoved. "You brought a man into our house," I said. "You chose him. You planned around him. Don't call me cruel for doing what the law allows." She searched my face for malice and found only truth. That truth is a flat thing. It doesn't soothe, it doesn't comfort, it clears the board. She had rehearsed indignation, produced tears, tried to strike guilt. None of it landed, not anymore. There was an honesty in my voice that surprised both of us. It was not fury, it was not triumph, it was final. She folded like wet paper. For a moment she looked smaller than I remembered. I felt no jubilation, only acceptance. Justice rarely feels like victory. Mostly it feels like the closing of a door. I did not rush to gloat, but I did not hide what I had. I told her about the SEC inquiry, the IRS notice. I told her Brandon's accounts were under scrutiny and that I'd handed evidence to investigators. Her face moved through stages, disbelief, denial, then the slow, hard pull of reality. "You ruined him," she said, voice cracking. "I didn't ruin him," I replied. "He built his ruin." The information landed like a hammer. It was not personal theater. It was paper, signatures, subpoenas. It had the weight of institutions behind it. When the truth lands, people scramble for explanation. They call names. They lie. They try to paint themselves as victims. This time, their stories collapsed under the paperwork. I felt a cold satisfaction, the kind that comes from writing a ledger. Not joy, not cruelty, equilibrium. They would face consequences. The law would do its work. I had done mine. I gave her 2 days. Pack what you want. Be gone by Friday. No drama, no scenes, no negotiation beyond what was on paper. She stood in the hallway that evening with a box of trinkets. Neighbors watched. Voices softened. Her phone calls were frantic and thin. When I turned the key on Friday, the house felt the way an emptied room does. Slightly echoing, honest. The photographs were gone. The bed folded up, the curtains hung limp. She walked away without looking back. Her heels faded down the street. I locked the door and sat down on the cold kitchen tile. Relief came slow, heavy, solid. It wasn't triumph. It was the simple ending of a chapter that I'd written myself. I felt lighter because the deceit was gone, and quieter because the drama was over. Nathan arrived with cases and cables. He set the gear down like a surgeon prepping a table. We spread maps and spreadsheets across my living room, phone records, bank traces, name lists, email trails, timestamps, everything. He ran the tech checks. I verified the leads. We dubbed numbers. We cross-referenced accounts. We vetted witnesses. This was not revenge porn. This was architecture. We built a case that could stand in courtrooms and in headlines. We ran a dry test of our plan. The flow held. The evidence linked. There was a strange thrill in that certainty. Not childish, not violent. Practical, efficient. For the first time in months, I felt precise. Purpose returned, to restore what had been stolen and to make sure those who hurt others could not do it freely. When Nathan looked up, he gave me a short nod. We began at dawn the next day. We had a campaign. We had a plan. We had no illusions. Only work, only facts, only the slow pressure of proof. The money trail led to him, Kevin Chen, 41, former NSA contractor, digital forensics, encryption specialist, ghost with a keyboard. He had quit after a quiet scandal, classified files leaked, nothing proven. Perfect partner for Brandon. He could erase fingerprints without touching a keyboard. I followed the data through proxies, offshore nodes, and mirror servers. His digital style was clean, efficient, almost elegant. But every craftsman leaves a pattern. He reused one encryption key from an old government project. That key was his signature. And once you find a man's signature, you can find his door. I traced his location to a warehouse office on the edge of town. Late-night logins, unregistered router. A single line of code confirmed it. I sat back, breathing steady. It wasn't anger that moved me now. It was certainty. He thought he was invisible. He was about to learn that ghosts can be hunted too. You can't corner a hacker with brute force. You make him expose himself. I planted a flaw, a deliberate error in Brandon's financial archive. A line of false metadata, too tempting for Kevin to resist fixing. The moment he touched it, his system pinged mine. Access route traced. Files mirrored. He thought he'd found my weakness. What he found was his own reflection. His IP jumped 3 countries in 60 seconds. He was good, but not perfect. No one is. By sunrise, I had his full network map, email chains, transaction mirrors, VPN backdoors. Every secret he kept hidden under encryption now sat on my screen, all because I'd left one wrong number where he couldn't ignore it. I smiled. Smart men always fall for their own curiosity. He came alone just after midnight, pale, nervous, pretending not to be. Nathan and I waited in the shadows of the old warehouse. When Kevin walked in, the air felt heavier. "Sit," I said. He hesitated, then obeyed. I laid a folder on the table, screenshots, account numbers, photos of him and Brandon. His eyes darted from page to page. Sweat formed behind his glasses. "You've been careful," I said, "but not careful enough." He tried denial first, then silence, then a laugh that didn't last long. I leaned forward, calm. "This is everything, Kevin. Every woman, every transfer, every lie. You built the system. Now you get to decide if it buries you." He swallowed hard. The sound echoed louder than his words. He broke faster than I expected. Panic stripped away the arrogance. "I don't want to go to prison," he whispered. "Then cooperate," I said. "Testify. Hand over the data. Help take him down." He nodded, trembling. From his pocket, he pulled a small drive. "Everything's here," he said. "Accounts, messages, transactions, backups." I took it, gloved. The weight felt heavier than it should. He signed a written statement that Nathan recorded. Then I walked him to the door. "You'll get protection," I said, "but remember, some people you hurt will never forget your name." He nodded again, smaller now. The man who had built empires of numbers had become just another frightened witness. We turned the data over to federal investigators. Nathan handled the transfer. Chain of custody, full documentation. Kevin wanted immunity. He got leniency instead. He would testify, then disappear into witness protection. The files he provided were devastating. Dates, voice recordings, digital trails, offshore ledgers. Enough to build a dozen cases. Watching agents go through it, I felt an old calm settle in, the kind you feel when a mission reaches completion. No glory, just closure. Brandon's world had been digital glass. We had finally shattered it. FBI moved in 2 days later. Brandon was meeting his lawyer when they came through the door. He shouted, demanded to see warrants. They read the charges: wire fraud, racketeering, conspiracy, no bail. He turned, saw me standing outside the conference room window. For a moment, time slowed. Recognition, then fury. He screamed that I'd set him up, that I was government, that I was a ghost. He wasn't wrong. He just never understood what that meant. As they led him out in cuffs, I felt no triumph, only balance, the kind that comes when the scales finally stop moving. The news broke within hours. Every headline carried his name. Brandon Pierce, real estate magnate, philanthropist, fraud. His photo was everywhere, smiling, confident, framed by words like scandal and betrayal. The empire he built from stolen dreams collapsed overnight. Investors pulled out, partners disappeared, friends deleted numbers. He sat in a county cell, stripped of the charm that once bought him protection. No suits, no stage, just steel and concrete. Watching the coverage, I felt something like relief. Not joy, relief. For years, he'd moved through people's lives like a ghost, leaving ruin behind. Now the spotlight pinned him to the wall. Some evils don't end quietly. They end publicly, so everyone remembers the cost. Nathan and I met daily in a quiet office the Bureau lent us. Boxes of files lined the walls, labels, dates, cross-references. We sorted, reviewed, and indexed everything. Kevin's testimony, the victims' affidavits, financial trails that led from luxury condos to offshore shells. The prosecutors worked long hours building the story piece by piece. We were there not as heroes but as witnesses. Our role was simple: make sure the truth held together. I studied the evidence again and again until I could trace every number from memory. This was no longer about revenge, it was about proof. Every statement, every page, every fact, ready for the light of the courtroom. The courtroom was full by 9 a.m. Reporters filled the back rows, whispering behind notepads. Jurors stared forward, pale and tense. Brandon sat at the defense table, thinner, eyes hollow, still trying to look in control. The judge entered. Silence dropped. The charges were read: fraud, conspiracy, racketeering, 27 counts. For the first time, I saw him flinch. The air felt thick, the way it does before a storm. Everyone in that room carried part of his damage. Now we were here to return it to him. When the prosecution began outlining the case, the weight of it filled the space. Numbers became stories, stories became wounds, and every wound had a face. Kevin took the stand on the third day. His voice trembled at first, then steadied. He spoke for hours about the accounts, the scripts, the women Brandon targeted, how they chose victims, isolated them, drained their savings, vanished before questions could catch them. Every detail landed like a blow. Dates, emails, voice recordings. It wasn't rumor anymore, it was confession. At one point, the courtroom was silent except for Kevin's voice and the sound of pens scratching notes. Even the judge leaned forward. When he finished, he looked small, empty, but honest finally. The truth had weight, and it was crushing all of them. One by one, the women took the stand. They spoke of trust, of manipulation disguised as affection, of losing homes, savings, families. A mother described selling her wedding ring to pay rent. Another said she'd tried to end her life after realizing everything she'd believed was a lie. The courtroom fell silent. Even the reporters stopped writing. For the first time, the story wasn't about crime. It was about pain. And pain doesn't lie. I felt my throat tighten. These women had lived what I'd only glimpsed. Their courage gave the truth shape. By the end of the day, even the defense looked ashamed. No argument could wash the blood from those stories. Then came the last witness, Victor Chen, Brandon's half-brother. He walked to the stand slowly, head high, voice steady. He told the jury how Brandon had destroyed their family business, framed him, and left him to serve time for crimes he didn't commit. He didn't shout, he didn't curse. He just told the truth, line by line, until the silence in the room became heavy enough to break. For once, Brandon looked away, couldn't meet his brother's eyes. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it speaks quietly, from the mouth of someone who survived it. When Victor stepped down, the jury didn't move. They'd heard enough. So had I. It happened near the end of the trial. The prosecution rested. The evidence spoke for itself. Then Brandon stood. At first he just shook his head. Then the shouting began. He called everyone liars. Me, Kevin, his own lawyer. "You set me up!" he screamed. This was all government work. Spit flew from his mouth. Guards moved closer. The judge tried to quiet him, but he wouldn't stop. He slammed his hands on the table, yelling names, threats, nonsense. 2 officers grabbed his arms. He kicked a chair, nearly fell. They dragged him out as the courtroom watched. Reporters scribbled like mad. The same man who once sold lies with a smile now left claw marks on the floor. For years, he'd built an image of control, and in one outburst, he destroyed it himself. I didn't look away. It wasn't vengeance, it was clarity. A week later, the verdict came. The jury was out less than 4 hours. Guilty, on every count. Brandon Pierce, 23 years federal time, no parole before 15. Kevin Chen, 15 years for cooperation and conspiracy. The room was silent as the judge read the sentence. No one smiled. Justice isn't celebration. It's the removal of poison. When Brandon turned toward me, eyes blazing, I saw no power left in him, only a man cornered by the truth. He mouthed something. Maybe a threat, maybe regret. Either way, it didn't matter. He was finally exactly where he belonged, inside a system he could no longer manipulate. Months later, the restitution reports came through. 87% of the stolen money recovered. Offshore accounts seized. Properties reclaimed. The victims were reimbursed. Some started small businesses. Others donated to fraud awareness programs. Nathan and I helped coordinate the recovery. Watching those accounts refill wasn't about numbers. It was about dignity returning. People who'd been humiliated now had proof that the world could still be fair. For me, it wasn't glory. It was purpose. Every hour I'd spent documenting, tracking, exposing, it meant something, not just to them, to me. It reminded me that justice, when done right, doesn't shout. It restores. Jennifer signed the final divorce papers in silence, her eyes red, hands shaking slightly. Across the table, I signed my name, steady and clear. No anger, no blame left. She tried to speak, but no words came. Only a small sob, swallowed halfway. The clerk notarized the signatures. It was done. We stood, and she whispered, "I'm sorry." I nodded once. No reply. Some apologies come too late to matter. When I walked out of that office, the air felt wider than it had in years. The weight was gone. All that remained was stillness and truth. Weeks later, she asked to meet. I agreed. One last time. We sat across from each other in a quiet cafe. She looked older, softer somehow. "I thought what we had was love," she said. "It wasn't," I answered. "It was a role. We both played our parts until the play ended." She looked down. No tears this time, just silence. There was nothing left to fix, no anger left to carry. Only recognition. Two people who had once shared a lie, now standing in the truth. I paid for the coffee. She didn't stop me. When we stood, she said, "Take care of yourself." I said, "I already am." And that was the last time we spoke. I sold the house within a month. Too many ghosts in those walls. Too many lies buried in the carpet. I bought a loft downtown. Brick walls, tall windows, no memories. Empty, but honest. At night, I'd sit by the window, the city hum steady beneath me. No pretense, no mask, just the quiet rhythm of being alive. The old house had been the stage for betrayal. This one was the workshop for rebirth. For the first time, I didn't miss anything. I didn't need to. Peace doesn't always mean quiet. Sometimes it means the noise around you no longer owns your mind. I looked out over the lights of the city and whispered to no one. This time, the story is mine. Nathan and I founded Cooper and Carter Security. A simple name, a clean mission. We helped victims of fraud, stalking, and domestic abuse rebuild their safety, the kind of people we once protected overseas. Now, we did it here, quietly, efficiently. Our office was small at first. 2 desks, 1 coffee maker, and a purpose strong enough to carry us. Clients came in broken. They left standing taller. That was the difference. We didn't save them. We showed them how to save themselves. For the first time in years, I felt alive in the right way. Not from adrenaline, from meaning. Every call, every case, every grateful handshake reminded me this was what my skills were for. Not deception, not survival, service. And that, more than medals or missions, finally felt like honor. Sometimes I still wake before dawn. Old habits die hard. I sit by the window, coffee in hand, and trace the journey backward. 15 years as an agent, 3 as a husband, 1 as a ghost of both. I'd seen death, betrayal, and the slow erosion of identity. But I'd also seen what happens when a man decides to stop hiding. I wasn't a soldier anymore. Not a husband, not even a victim, just me. The masks were gone. The silence finally made sense. Peace, I realized, isn't about forgetting the past. It's about accepting every scar as proof that you survived it. Months later, I stood on a stage at a financial crime conference. Hundreds of people watched, agents, lawyers, survivors. I told them about patience, about gathering truth before acting, about never mistaking silence for surrender. Con artists thrive on isolation, I said. Victims think they're alone, but when they connect, they start to see the pattern, and the pattern is what breaks the illusion. When I finished, the room rose to its feet. Applause washed over me, steady, grateful, real. It wasn't fame I felt, it was peace. Because this time, people weren't clapping for who they thought I was. They were clapping for the truth. Life slowed finally. No more hurried footsteps in anonymous hallways. No more midnight messages that said only, "Are you awake?" No more calendars stuffed until breathing felt like a luxury. Each morning I cracked the window for a spill of sunlight, took a long inhale, and felt my chest stop being shoved along like a leaf in floodwater. I started teaching self-defense at the community center, a white room with long tube lights and a scuffed wooden floor, the kind that hummed softly when sneakers slid. Most of my students were women, each with a posture, a sigh, a story, stronger than they knew. I always began with breath. Short, long, in through the nose, belly expands, out through the mouth, slow. When breathing steadied, the body found its voice. Shift weight, lock the wrist, maintain distance, hold the gaze if you must. But many days I told them we weren't training to defeat anyone. We were training to stop surrendering so easily in the ordinary places. A stare that makes you shrink, a voice that makes you go quiet, a habit of saying sorry even when you're not at fault. Self-defense begins with how you stand, I said, and with how you choose calm. I adopted a German shepherd named Echo. People called him smart, loyal, calm. I only knew that the first time he looked up at me, something solid returned. Echo went everywhere with me. To class, to the river, to the cafe with warm yellow lamps and old Fleetwood Mac drifting low. He didn't bark much. He'd set his chin on my knee when I sat thinking, breath warm, steady. Sometimes he reminded me that trust isn't a grand decision. It's a small habit you repeat. Evenings were simple as a black coffee cooling slow, a playlist turned low, a long path along the water. Ducks dotted the surface like little exclamation marks, unhurried. Runners flashed by with earbuds and sunlit sweat. I matched my steps to the soft clink of the leash, Echo pausing now and then to nose a rough patch of bark. No ghosts, I reminded myself. No lies. No emergencies. No line drawn between stay and go. For the first time, I lived without waiting for the next punch. The next mission was peace. It sounded like a joke. Turned out the hardest thing was learning to stand still on earth that wasn't shaking. One of my students was Lan, a ponytail, cold hands, the kind of smile that didn't quite land. She said she startled when footsteps came behind her. "I hate crowded supermarkets," she admitted. "Even pushing the cart is exhausting." We practiced spatial awareness. Glance back 45 degrees before you turn. Keep a buffer with the person ahead. One day Lon cried while punching the heavy bag. Tears fast. Quiet. I didn't ask why. I handed her a tissue and said, "Keep going. Tears don't make you weak." And the way she rose on her toes and drove the 10th punch like she was staking a claim on her own name, it reminded me our class wasn't just technique. It was where people returned the name of their fear to itself. I fixed my small apartment, tightened hinges, brushed a new coat of paint over a tired wall. The scratch of the broom, the smell of fresh paint felt like starting over. I built a shelf for my books. Frayed spines, pencil notes faded to ghosts. In a black notebook, I wrote small things. Echo held still for 10 seconds. Lan left without scanning for exits. Slept 7 hours, no dreams. The end of nightmares isn't forgetting, it's when the past can't find the door anymore. One morning Echo picked up a grass burr under his paw, limping delicate and proud. I lifted him onto the vet's metal table. The vet's eyes were practical. "Just a scrape. He's strong." Back home, Echo fell asleep on the rug, paws twitching like he was running in a dream. I rested my hand on his chest, felt the steady thud, a silent confirmation that things were improbably okay. On rainy afternoons, I read in a low voice to myself, the rain tapping gently at memory, not hurting, just tapping. I learned how to let a day pass without proving a single thing. One evening, a drunk man clattered near the center's door. Echo's ears snapped up. I told him, "Sit." The man muttered, swayed, threw a curse into the air. I didn't cue the class into defensive stances. I stood 3 steps away, angled my body so he could pass without brushing against me. He staggered on, vanished around the noodle shop's corner. Echo flicked a look at me as if to ask, "No chase?" I laughed. Not every fight is worth collecting. Pain is similar. Not every wound needs to be opened and stitched. Some just need air and clean water, then time. Everything closed itself with small things. A cup of coffee without sugar, training shoes drying by the door, a playlist ending on track 12. At lights out, Echo curled at the bed's foot, a punctuation mark steadying the whole day. I shut my eyes, no hoping, no bracing, listened to my heartbeat in time with his breath. Peace isn't loud. Maybe that's why it lasts. One afternoon, my phone buzzed. I was on the porch, watching a rectangle of sun slide across the floorboards. Echo had stretched himself into the warmth, occasionally huffing. The screen lit. A message. I hadn't saved a name, but sometimes the first 3 words are enough and the mind fills in the rest. I saw the news about your company. I'm proud of you. I read it twice. No questions, no instructions, no openings, no anger, no sorrow. Just distance, like a letter released into a river, fully aware no one is waiting on the far bank. A few scenes blinked in, grainy film, Jennifer at the window tying her hair back with a black elastic, asking if I wanted dinner, the way she set a bowl just off-center and nudged it straight, the blink before a sigh during our worst argument. But those pieces no longer linked. They were separate stones weathering separately, not a path. The message felt like a period in italics, weighty and light at once. Light, because it didn't ask for anything I couldn't give. Weighty, because it admitted our lives had traveled apart long enough that nothing further was required. I put the phone down, fingers on its edge a moment. Echo lifted his head and set his chin on my thigh, eyes warm. I stroked between his ears and heard the hum of ordinary life holding me up. Jennifer's text wasn't a summons. It was a courtesy, late, but gentle enough not to cut. I opened it once more, looked for a few seconds, and deleted it. Not spite, closure. Some doors don't need to slam. They just need to stay doors, and you choose not to open them. Echo nudged my sleeve. Walk? I asked. He sprang up, tail a metronome gone happy. I clipped the leash. The gate creaked. A fine mist began. The path to the river smelled like wet earth and green. I skipped a track. A friendly song drifted in like a thin blanket. No other messages. None needed. We walked along the water while kids shrieked at the cold edge. I thought maybe Jennifer had done the best thing possible. Offer a kind signal, then step out of frame. Back home, I put on the kettle, poured tea. The phone lay dark. In the notebook, I wrote, Jay texted, I deleted, felt light. Some would say I was stubborn, that I should keep it to reread when I missed her. But I don't want memory curated by my thumb. Memory arrives when it wants, like the smell of rain grazing your cheek, leaving nothing behind except proof the weather changed. I opened the window to the evening breeze. Same street, same weak gold street light and the bicycle leaning just a little wrong. I felt slow and clear as a handwritten sentence, no hurry, no anxiety to please a reader. That night, Echo twitched at faraway thunder. I slid a hand down to his back. You're okay. Maybe that was also for me. The last message didn't pull me backward. It reminded me everyone deserves a I'm happy for you goodbye. I smiled, not toward anyone specific. A small lesson. Sometimes the only reply life needs is a quiet nod. It took years to understand. Betrayal doesn't kill you. Pretending does. Pretending you're fine while you're cracking. Pretending you're weak when your chest wants to stand tall. Pretending you can't begin again when every morning is an invitation that keeps arriving. Every time you trade truth for comfort, you die a little. A polite, patient death, like mold spreading in a wall. One day I decided to stop dying. It sounds dramatic, but it was really a habit change. I chose to stand alone in honesty rather than sleep beside a lie that knows how to sing. After that choice, some things sharpened. My class wasn't a sport anymore, it was honesty practice. A wrist lock isn't about making someone hurt, I told them. It's about reminding your body you still have options. At the end of class, I asked for a small ritual. Stand tall, breathe deep 3 times, whisper, I am here. It sounded silly, but faces changed. Shoulders dropped, eyes steadied, chins lifted by a degree. Lon, the supermarket shy, could now walk a full loop in a crowded aisle without biting her lip until it bled. She told us about a man shadowing her home. She turned, looked him squarely in the eye, and asked, What do you want? He stumbled and crossed the street. Not because she had a secret trick, because she stopped disappearing. I kept a ritual too. Each morning before taking Echo out, I faced the mirror and said, Don't choose the victim role today. I didn't win any day. I just didn't lose to the old script. I answered emails briefly without defensiveness. I declined a few mismatched collaborations without guilt. I called an old friend and said, "I miss you," without circling the runway. In the evening I cooked simple, eggs over easy, a hunk of bread, a handful of greens. Echo ate after me. The vet had asked me to keep that order. These small routines were pebbles under a foundation, firmer, flatter, so the house wouldn't settle crooked. A new student, Han, entered class with a green bloom around her wrist. She avoided eyes. I didn't ask, "Who did this?" I handed her a wrap. "Let's bandage. I'll show you." That day we practiced escaping a front wrist grab. Her hands shook, but on the third try she nailed it. Rotate, find the thumb's weak line, pull free. She lifted her wrist and studied it, then exhaled, as if she'd realized she could interrupt what once felt decided. Before leaving, she whispered, "Maybe I'll sleep tonight." I nodded. "Why not? Once you remember, you have hands." At dusk, the sky turned a thin lavender pane with a bright edge. Echo ran loops and always returned. Always returned. I thought about the big lessons that had once demanded memorization: forgive, let go, live in the present. And then the small lesson that did the actual work: tell the truth to yourself, repeatedly. Tell the truth that Jennifer's message pulled me down a notch. Tell the truth that some nights I still hear an imaginary door open somewhere. Tell the truth that I'm afraid of being dragged backward. Once named, those waves shrank, their noise the same, their pull less fierce. I started writing honesty notes on sticky paper. On the fridge, eat because hungry, not because empty. On the door, go slow. In my wallet, don't negotiate with fear. On the desk, call the person. Visitors smiled at the clutter, called me fussy. To me, they were road signs on a highway finally reopening after repairs. Not pretty, just pointed. One crowded Friday, I tried something new. Instead of our usual finisher, I told the class, "Let's do this. Tell a short story about a time you defended yourself. Doesn't have to be physical." Someone said no to unpaid overtime. Someone called the cops on a belligerent neighbor. Someone wrote an apology to herself for trying too hard. Small stories, but spoken aloud, they lined up like a squad. I watched the room and saw people hadn't come to learn to strike. They'd come to stand next to their own courage. After class, I clicked off the lights by row. Echo patrolled the edges like a serious teaching assistant. I paused at the wall-length mirror, not to inventory scars, but to see whether my eyes still flickered with dread. They didn't. Not heroic, not transcendent, just okay. A modest okayness I once believed I had no right to. That night I wrote this in my notebook. Betrayal doesn't kill. Pretending kills. Pretending peace. Storm stays. Pretending weak. Lungs full of power can't exhale. Pretending you can't begin. Clock still knocks. Trade truth for ease. Die an inch. Not today. Today, stand in a small light. I stopped writing. Echo sneezed, an exclamation point in the right place. I laughed, closed the book, turned out the light. Next morning, with the sun barely up, I took Echo out earlier than usual. Air cool, leaves smelling rinsed. The old fisherman was at his spot, brimmed cap, steady hands. He nodded, I nodded back. We didn't speak. The silence had a gentle conspiracy. We understood life was occurring at a very adequate pace, requiring no proof. If anyone asked for my final lesson, I'd say, freedom starts when you stop pretending. Don't pretend you're alone when you need a friend. Don't pretend you're strong when you need to cry. Don't pretend to forgive while you're still angry. Don't pretend you're unafraid while the wind still howls. Tell the truth, then train from there. Truth is rough, but it's the best floor to stand on. I'd add, if I must choose between a soft bed beside a lie and a patch of hard ground under an open sky, I choose the ground. On that ground, I know where east is. I see the sunrise. I know where I am inside a day that's absolutely new. Since accepting that, life quit being a delayed sentence. It became a wide courtyard where I could jog Echo around once, breathe hard, laugh loud, feel my blood heat like two hands rubbed together. At night, I set the phone face down. Not because I despise connection, but because I no longer let messages decide the weather in my chest. I decide, today is quiet. If someone texts, "I'm proud of you," I'll smile and be grateful. If no one texts, I'll pour tea and be grateful. The final lesson taught me that small power, to name my own day. Echo curls, breathing deep. Outside, Wind combs the trees like someone whispering goodnight. I close my eyes. Freedom is this, not the absence of dark, but having enough light inside to see the next few steps. And with a few steps, every night eventually runs out of night. I look straight into the camera, my voice calm, steady. If you've ever been betrayed, I say, don't just survive it, rebuild from it. Don't let anyone else decide your worth. You are not what they left behind. You are what you rise to become. I pause. The silence feels full, not empty. Stand up, speak your truth, and when you're ready, come back here. There are more stories to tell. The screen fades to black. A soft note plays. And for a moment, every man watching knows this isn't just a story, it's a mirror.